Live from Atlanta, Georgia. It's the Zach Ballinger Show, where we help you find your direction through passion and purpose. My name is Zach. I'm your host. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Two ways you can join the show. If you're out there, we are streaming live via YouTube. So if you have any questions, pop them into the comment box. We'll make sure to get to them. Always, before any guest comes on, you can email me, Zach at zachballinger.com. Some of you have already emailed in some questions. That's great. I really appreciate it. You guys can always pre-email me those questions. We'll make sure to get to them. So my guest today, one more time, your pronunciation on your name. We were talking about behind the show, but I think I'm about to goof it up again.
It's Giuseppe Grammatico. It's a mouthful.
Giuseppe, thank you so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
So before we get into these questions, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm here in New Jersey. We were just talking about visiting the tree here in Rockefeller Center, not too far from here. And live here with my two children, my wife. We've lived here my entire life. And what I do is I'm actually a corporate refugee. I was a corporate employee for many years and decided that I needed something more, and became a business owner close to 20 years ago. And with that being said, I said, you know what? A lot of people have the same or similar questions to the questions I had in figuring out if that was the right fit. So I became a franchisee and a franchise owner years ago, as well as a consultant and coach, and help people through the process of figuring out if business ownership as well as franchise ownership is a good fit. So that's what I do, help people across the U.S. as well as Canada.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So let's move left from right. And I'm going to start out at a very elementary level, and then let's move into some more intermediate. Explain in 101, if I'm a high school student, what is a franchise?
Yeah. So a franchise is a business. It's simply, if someone wants to become a business owner, it's a type of business to where the franchisor, the person or the company that founded the franchise, has put together a proven system, a proven model that they've tested over the years on their dime. It may have taken them years, but it's essentially a proven business model, a proven system, so that when you start your business, you don't need to figure everything out from scratch. You can kind of just run with it and start generating revenue immediately.
And so, Giuseppe, some of those maybe examples might be, when we think of large franchise, just for the audience out there, it might be Subway sandwiches or UPS stores. So it's something like, if we're getting into brands, that's something similar to what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, so some of the brands, so there's essentially over 4,000 franchise companies in the U.S., and they're in every industry. So most people, they go right into food, right? Because they've seen the McDonald's of the world, and there's been movies about franchises and things like that. But if you can think of an industry or a type of business, there is a franchise. So there's franchises around mosquito spraying. There's franchises around employment services, compacting trash and dumpsters and things like that. So there's literally a franchise in every type of business.
So, and I love your service because you're direct and honest with people, because I think you would both agree, and I would agree too. It's not something for everybody.
Correct.
And business is not something for everybody. But what are the advantages of owning a franchise, and then what are some of the disadvantages?
Yeah, I that's a great question. And I look at it this way. It's more of what are you looking to achieve and what's a good fit for you. So either when you look at franchises versus a startup, they're both great, right? It all depends on what you're trying to build. But a franchise will give you what I talk about in my book, as well as our webinars, an unfair advantage. So depending on, for example, in my case, I wanted the business built for me versus having to build it from scratch, where I was figuring out the product and the service and maybe all the vendors and things like that we were going to be using. I just wanted the system built so I could run with it and start generating revenue and scaling. So a franchise is for someone that's not necessarily concerned about creating everything from scratch. They just want to run with the model to achieve something, right? They're looking to achieve time freedom, spending time with their families, not having to work every single day, not being able to take vacations and things like that. A startup won't necessarily be cheaper than a franchise because there's going to be some time there. It may take you a lot longer to get your business up and running. And we talk about the time value of money, but you'll be able, so the advantage there will be that you can create the product or service from scratch exactly the way you want it to be, versus a franchise. The system will already be in place. So you'll already have a product or service like McDonald's. You'll have a menu already put together. So if you're looking to be extremely creative by adding additional products or services, a franchise may not be the best fit. Although you can go about your marketing in a very customized and personal way, but certain things are, you're going to be following that system.
And I really believe, in this passion concept that you should love what you do every day and that you should enjoy what you do. And if you don't, you should work to try to get there.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty simple concept. So, I would also encourage people to work in that field. So let's say you want to own your own dry cleaning business. Well, have you worked inside of a dry cleaner? Do you know the operations? You may
Right.
be passionate about business, which I totally understand. But I also think there should be some type of experience where you get your hands dirty and you see what it's like operationally to run a dry cleaner. I get that question. Somebody might say, I want to own their own dry cleaner. And I said, well, have you ever been inside one?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've taken my clothes there. Well, then what possesses you to have that passion to own a dry cleaning business? So I really think that you should be kind of know the industry pretty well because let's face it, just because you buy a franchise, does that guarantee success?
No, I mean it's a business, right? There's no guarantees. So to your point, yes, the passion piece, focus on what you're doing on a daily basis, right? So maybe in that example, maybe they know a wealthy person that owns multiple dry cleaners, but the biggest thing is you want to make sure you're aligned. So if you want time freedom and you talk to that business owner that has a dozen dry cleaners, but they're working 24/7, they may not be aligned. I'm not saying they're working 24/7, but just in this example. So you want to make sure they're aligned with your goals so that, okay, they have the lifestyle. They're not just making a lot of money, but they have the time freedom to enjoy it. So with a franchise, not every franchise is created the same. Let's be honest, right? Some systems are stronger. Some systems have really figured out how to make their franchisees extremely successful. So you may have two franchises that offer the exact same service, but the infrastructure, the system, how they go about doing business is completely different. So definitely focus on your daily, what you're doing on a daily basis as a franchisee, as a business owner. But with any franchise, the service I offer is helping you find that right franchise. But a big portion of that is going back and speaking. One of the advantages of franchising is speaking with existing franchisees. So to your point, visiting the dry cleaner, doing the exact same thing. If it's a food service or employment service and they're in your area, speak with them, visit them, offer to work maybe for free and kind of maybe help them out one day or travel with them one day while you're offering your services for free in exchange for learning the business. And who's going to say no to that for free help nowadays?
Well, especially in this, market, you can't find anybody.
Correct.
So, I would give this advice before, and you might look. You're not going to score every time, right? They're going to be like, well, no, we got liability or whatever. So, but to your point, like, there's no better time to ask to work for free because they can't find anybody right now.
Yeah, it's been challenging. It's been difficult. So I think it's an advantage since you're helping them out and you're getting to learn the business. But keeping in mind, there's plenty of great franchises out there, but that doesn't mean they're a great fit for you. So when people ask me, well, why do people fail as franchisees? I always go back to, well, should you have owned a business to begin with? You jumped into it because you heard franchise X or franchise Z is making a lot of money, but should you have got into business ownership and did you buy the right franchise for you? And then secondly, when you purchased that franchise, were you capitalized? Did you have enough money to run the business? I hear this all the time where people spent the entire savings and have nothing else left over. And then I go back and say, okay, well, what about who's paying your rent or your mortgage? Who's paying your health insurance? And they're like, well, I never factored that in. So a good franchisor will set some financial requirements, give you all the information up front, and then they'll actually give you a list of franchisees you can speak with. So you can ask them all these great questions, such as knowing what you know now, would you do it all over again? And now you have the next follow-up question. What did the franchisor do to step up during COVID to help you out? So that's an advantage you have now in figuring out, okay, they really stepped up. They really, they pivoted, they transitioned in how they're doing business from in-person to virtual. We had quite a few that are doing that. And now it's more of a hybrid where they're offering both services. So great time to be asking questions and asking, what did you do last 18 months to support your franchisees?
Yeah. And, getting acquainted with some of these business terms, if, you don't know what net profit is versus gross profit or, gross margins, well, you really need to understand that cost of goods sold, get that terminology down, and learn about it. And, yes, there's franchises out there that teach you those, but you have to be really educated on that. With that being said, you kind of hit on something. There are barriers to this because I have kids often say, well, I want to own my own Chick-fil-A right out of high school. And, then I said, well, let's look at the requirements that are on the website. And,
Right.
You have to have a certain $1 million either in the bank or, that's a huge exorbitant franchise fee, or you have to have experience
Right.
working there. So there are some barriers when kids hear these big names, right?
Yeah, there's depending on the business, when you're talking about brick and mortar, like a Chick-fil-A or a McDonald's, it's a big investment. They're not all $1 million investments. They're investments that are much less, under six figures, under 100,000. So barriers are there to set the franchisee up for success. So before even getting into the financials, when you have an intro call with the franchisor, it's a two-way interview. You're going to be interviewing them and they'll be interviewing you just to make sure it's a good fit. They want to make sure that if it's a networking or business coaching where you're going out there networking, cold calling, trying to drum up new business from business owners, they want to make sure personality-wise that you're a good fit. Financially, they want to make sure you're a good fit, that you can cover the franchise fee. And typically when they give you the investment requirements, they'll give you a range. And that range is a much higher number because they'll incorporate maybe 3 to 6 months of marketing, 3 to 6 months of covering an employee. So they want to make sure they set you up for success and that you're not just investing all your money and not, as I mentioned before, don't have the funds if you're leaving your job to pay your mortgage or for your rent. So they put it in place to set you up to make sure you hit the financial requirements, you pass the intro call. And again, it's two-way. You want to make sure it's a good fit for you as well. So just because they feel you're a good fit, it may not be, you may not feel the same after having that first call. And typically, by the second call, if they're a good fit. So you want to ask them the questions, learn the business. And as you learn the business and understand it really well and get their agreement, that's when you start asking existing franchisees, because you don't want to jump into that phase in the very beginning because you may not know the questions to ask. And the franchisor, to your point, they're very helpful. They'll explain the financials. You'll be reviewing their financials. You'll be putting together a pro forma, which they'll help you put together, and figuring out what kind of money can I make with a single store location or a single territory. And if my goal is to generate $250,000 in personal income every year, how many territories on average will I need given the data that you've provided for me? So that's not a guarantee, but it's just an average of what the average franchisee is doing. So you have all these benefits, all these value adds that you can incorporate in your franchise search.
And so, what are the ways? Let's say there's somebody that's interested in business and they're interested in particular a franchise. They want a proven model. But I get this question so much, and I'd say you get it too, but I don't know what type of business I want to do. I want to own a business, I want to own a franchise. It's the model I want to go town, but I don't know. I'm not passionate about anything, but I know I want to do business.
Right.
What do you say to them?
So we take them through our process, and our process is working in reverse. Because if you start looking at franchises or specific businesses, it can become overwhelming. Because sometimes the industry has nothing to do with the role of the business owner. So, for example, a golf franchise, thinking, all right, I love golf, I'm going to buy a golf franchise, but your role is going to be retail. It's going to be a lot of turnover. It's going to be stocking shelves, working holidays, nights, and weekends. It doesn't really have much to do with golf per se, in the traditional retail business. So if you work in reverse, it's actually much simpler. It's basically figuring out, why do I want to own a business to begin with? It's a heck of a lot of work and stress. Let's be honest. It's not, okay, I'm going to buy a franchise and I'm going to sit back. It's still work. There's still going to be hours. There's going to be money put up in the investment. So what does your ideal day look like? Are you working 5 days a week? I live in New Jersey. Am I going to stay in New Jersey? Am I going to be traveling? Do I have children? Do I want to be home to pick them up from school? Just actually map out, your average workday, your ideal average workday, and just what your business looks like. What do your employees look like? And what I mean by that is, you have a lot of employees. Are they minimum wage? Are they W-2? Are they 1099 contractors? Some people are like, I just want a few employees. That's fine. Write it down. And as we create that list, we get very specific. So we know the number of employees. We know that I want to be working from home versus a retail brick and mortar location. And the list goes on. I'm going to be in New Jersey, and I just want to do business in this particular state. And once you create that list, and I work on this together with all our candidates, we say, okay, this is the ideal business. Now let's go out and figure out what franchises, because you decided on a proven system, what franchises match that model. And I do some of the legwork. I make sure that the territory is available. I make sure that the franchisor feels that this particular person may be a good fit before the intro call. So if you go about it that way, I think it's much better, because then you decide, you're selective on the business for you, versus I want to buy a McDonald's franchise, and then you look and say, okay, well, I wanted to keep the investment at 100,000, but the investment's $1 million. Okay, I can swing it. I wanted to keep the employees to a minimum. Okay, I'm going to need 50 employees. Okay, I'll make that change. And now, by kind of constantly changing your wants, you have a business that's the complete opposite of what you intended on investing in. So I think it's a simpler process, getting that blank piece of paper, figuring out what the business and your life looks like, and then figuring out from there, what's a business that can help me attain this and get me to this.
This has been super helpful. So now you run your own podcast show. What do you folks? Let's say somebody's out there listening. They like to hear from you more. What kind of show do you have that might interest my guests?
Yeah, so the podcast is called Franchise Freedom, and it's not all about franchising, believe it or not. Most of the guests are not in the franchise space, and it's every person I have on the show will give you their story as to how they went from W-2 employee to employer to business owner. We have a specific guest to talk about a specific topic like funding. Okay, great. I want to be a business owner. I want to be a franchise owner. How do I fund this thing, right? what are my options? How do I come up with all this money? We have guests like attorneys. What should you set up an LLC or an S corporation? And obviously this is general advice. It's going to vary depending on your situation. But so all the guests have great stories to show you the transition, how they went about it. We have specific guests. We even have guests, founders of franchise companies, talk to you about, why they got into franchising, what they did during COVID. So we essentially cover all aspects of entrepreneurship, franchising, and in some cases, who's not a good fit for franchising and who is a good fit. So we essentially cover everything. So we have about 70 episodes, I think, online, and hopefully looking to hit that 100 episode mark in Q1 of next year.
So, Giuseppe, where can people find you if they're interested in either your podcast or your service, or they want to connect with you on social media?
Yep. If you go right to my website, everything is there. So it's GG, my initials, because it's hard to spell and hard to pronounce. So GG, thefranchiseguide.com. And if you go on there, we have a free book download. So I actually brought my book today. It's Franchise Freedom as well. So kept the titles the same as the podcast. So it's under resources. You can listen to the podcast. The book is our entire process. Should you decide to figure this out on your own, or you can reach out to me. There's a book a call. It's a 20-minute call to help you figure out if even business ownership is the right fit for you, as I help quite a few people, especially out of college or in college. Maybe they're in college trying to figure out next steps. Maybe the timing isn't right, but we put together a plan as to what that looks like. Best part of our service, it's free. There's no fee. There's no contracts. We get paid directly from the franchise companies should you decide to buy a franchise. But all the information that you need is there. We even just created a FAQ page under resources, and it answers your top 25 questions on franchise ownership. That alone is a great value add, because you can go down to your whatever your time frame is and go through a video a day and learn more and more about the business.
Awesome. And one more time, the website.
So it's GG, the franchise guide, GUIDE, and you'll have everything there. You can have access to my calendar, podcast, book. It's all on there.
Well, we certainly appreciate your time today. We know you're very busy. Thanks for helping us through some of these basic questions that we've been kind of wondering throughout our travels. Really appreciate you coming on and giving back your time.
Thanks, Zach. It was a pleasure. Had a great time.
All right, everybody. Thank you. This is the Zach Ballinger Show.